So happy you guys are here. I'm Diana Place. I'm the founder of Third Act Quest, and I'm really glad to have you here for the second of a 4-night series called The Gifts of Your Third Act. So over the 4 evenings we're going to spend together, 20 passionate and inspiring experts have come together to share their stories, their wisdom, and to hopefully inspire us and engage in some interesting conversation. We had a nice gathering last night, and there was a lot of really active participation from the Zoom audience. So we're really hoping that we can stimulate that again tonight. So at the end, I hope you come away with some tools and ideas, ways to grab on to some clarity and courage and optimism as we face this really pretty overwhelming time in history, and help us to embrace the decades ahead in our third act. So tonight's program is all about reinvention, remembering, reconnection with who we are, with our passions, some of which may have been buried over the years of our middle life, of the mid part of our lives, and ultimately a time for us to explore and create a vision for how we want to live and love and serve and ultimately thrive in the decades ahead in our third act. It's important for us, and the pandemic has really aided us, I think, to be a little bit more introspective and listen to that whispering or potentially yelling voice inside that's prodding us to make some sort of a change. Helping us to examine our priorities and understand what's truly the most meaningful for us. There's a final line from a poem by the poet Mary Oliver that's been a pretty powerful question for me across my life. And I thought it was really fitting for tonight's topic. So I'll read that quickly. It goes, "Tell me, what is it you plan for your one wild and precious life?" Now, I'm not sure if it hits you as powerfully as it always has me, but it's the type of thing that helps me and stops me in my tracks to really examine where I am in my life, and am I focusing my energies? Am I really digging deep to understand what, I hate to use the word purpose because sometimes it sounds a little over grand, but truly, remembering is reconnecting with really who you are. And it's usually as we hit these times in our lives, in the middle part of our lives, and some people it's earlier. For me, it was in my late 50s that I really finally think I figured out what it is that I wanted to pursue. And instead of, as I say, fueling other people's passions, I decided to fuel mine and do what, I had been in me and sort of nagging at me for years. So that sort of sets up the evening, and our first presentation of the evening that's going to be led by Kerry Moynihan with a group of 3 very inspiring transformational leaders who are here to share their stories with you, share the thinking, and share, whether they be the lightning strikes of events that happened that woke them up to what they really wanted to pursue in their lives, or what has been leading them all along from their heart to map out a life that's truly joyful and meaningful. So I hope it inspires you and inspires discussion. Kerry Moynihan. I'm going to let Kerry introduce the 3 distinguished panelists he's invited to join us tonight, but I'll start off and share a little bit about Kerry. First, sort of the LinkedIn version, and then a little bit of my own version. Because Kerry and I were happily seated, sometimes close to each other, in a Shakespeare class at the University of Virginia. But Kerry is currently the partner at Boyden, which is a global executive search firm. He's had a more than 30-year career as a search consultant, building executive teams and conducting board searches. He's successfully and dramatically restructured a number of boards. His clients.
You don't have to go through all that. That's fine.
Okay, so skipping all of that, I do say my favorite part of your profile is that You were a one-time Jeopardy Jeopardy contestant, and a radio disc jockey. So, which sets you up perfectly for Zoom. So ultimately, it was through the power of technology and LinkedIn that we reconnected just about a little less than 6 months ago. You reached out to me as I was starting to envision this series, and you so gratefully you jumped on board and have helped bring us here today. So thank you.
Delighted to do this. The three people, we talked about how do you sort of reimagine your career, and Deb and Steve and Pedro, I've known for roughly 70 years among the three of you. I won't tell how many I've known each of you for, but I thought were great living examples of people who were constantly reinventing themselves and constantly seeking knowledge and seeking how do you improve yourself. And my cousin Moore is on here. I take that example from my dear old dad, who was always inquisitive to the day he died, and at 88. And I think that's just it's a huge thing. And how do you pass on what success you've had and the lessons you've had to other people? And I think Deb Dugan and Steve Goldstein and Pedro Caceres are great examples of doing that. Maybe we'll kick it off, and Deb Dugan, we've known each other for many years, and was a lawyer, and then did not-for-profit work for musicians, and wound up heading a record label. You may remember Vanilla Ice and Wilson Phillips, among others, and then I'm sorry, the statute of limitations for suing her on that is over. But at any rate, and then ran a large business for Disney, and then shifted and went to not-for-profit and ran Red, and worked closely with Bono, and their mission was to reduce AIDS and malaria and so on, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think the world of Deb, and I'm delighted she's joining us. And I'll turn it over to you, Deborah.
Okay, great. I'd totally forgotten about Vanilla Ice, maybe purposely. But thank you so much, Kerry. And Diana, I just think it's so cool, I have to say out loud, that you put this together, because it's a hard time, and yet it's an important time to take stock of where we are, and probably more importantly, who we are, right? And so with COVID and everything going on, if we have don't have the luxury, but to just pause and look at where we are and where we want to be. And I think we were all good at maybe doing that in our 20s, saying, where will we be when we're 50? Let's manage our futures. It's quite important, I think, to do that now. So, in our generation, I think we had career paths, and millennials have jungle gyms, so that they'll just shift to the side for a lateral move because it's something that interests them. And they have a portfolio of interests. They usually have 3 things going on. They've got their main gig, they got a side gig, and they're really into yoga, or whatever it is, but they kind of have this portfolio. And I think that's a nice way to pause and look at your life and say, could you have a portfolio instead of maybe just a single driving force? So my path has definitely been more jungle gym. I went from law to the record label, where I learned marketing, dealing with artists. I was all aspirational, all about potential, and there for 8 years. And then 8 years at Disney, running their publishing division, which is more about branding and strategy, and maybe getting a little more momentum in life. And then at Red, which was, really interesting. There are these things that you just have to pay attention to. I was kind of at a cross place. I could have taken sort of a more traditional job that was in my path. But I knew I needed to make money, like, so I wasn't going to retire and do philanthropy. I needed to find a way to use my skill set. And could it be that the same skill set that I used at Disney and at EMI could be used for good? And
Mm,
so I was quite lucky because Red was the kind of combination between not-for-profit, and for-profit world, and it was for, instead of making rich people richer, for a good purpose. Um, and so I think what I try to do, and this is what I'd maybe recommend, is think of those common threads, and take the time to compose your life now, to really, take all in everything that you've heard people telling you you're a genius at this, or you're great at relationships, or you've been at General Electric for 30 years and you really know X, and it's your comfort zone. So like, own that. But as you're composing, maybe think more like a millennial. What would your 11-year-old self on a bike do? And create a portfolio of buckets. I mean, I'd ask everybody to sort of do that now. Right now, everybody has a bucket, usually that's family and friends. Like, that's a given. But what are your other buckets? For me, I liked innovation and storytelling. So I went on the board of the Moth, and I just volunteer and help out in innovation classes. And then last, again, you have to know your parameters and be incredibly practical. So again, I need to make money. So I'm consulting now for social impact, but it follows these threads. You started talking about it, Diana, meaning and purpose, overachievement. So, it's just a thing to pause about. Assume you've achieved. Look where you are. Like, assume that, if you made it this far, and you're able to keep a roof over your head, like, you've come to a place. And now think, what am I doing with that place? And there are all sorts of statistics that say if you have meaning and purpose, it most likely will lead to greater joy. And Kerry said something also about being a lifelong learner. A study just came out this week from the University of Chicago that said we have this myth that innovation and big aha moments and being an entrepreneur is about in your 20s. And there's all sorts of examples. Bill Gates made his first billion by the age of 30. Einstein had 5 papers on physics. Citizen Kane by Orson Welles in his 20s. But there are many, much more examples of 50 plus innovation, of Darwin spending his whole life looking at nature, and Virginia Woolf and Mark Twain, Huck Finn. So launch a startup. Seriously, it's the middle that makes you lag. But the beginning, and let's call it the last third if we're lucky, are when you can reinvent yourself and think bigger about your life, and maybe more deliberately. So with that, I pass it on, but really great to be here.
There's actually, under the heading of, I read a study, but the number of startups started by people post 50 has increased by 80% in the last 15 years. It's the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if they're right, but I mean that it's like a lot of people. And I mean, Steve will talk about this. We'll get to Steve, of why not reinvent business models, and because you have the virtue of experience to do so.
What I love too that you just shared, Deb, is the intersection of the ability to do well and do good. I think that is nirvana. If you can find a career path, a job, and a role that allows you to make impact that fits with which most important to you, that is, I guess, the ultimate, ring the bell prize. Yeah.
I think as we get older, our level of tolerance for certain things shifts and changes, and to just know yourself, to say, at this age, I'd really rather be with good people doing good things. That's one of my buckets, right? That's one of my buckets. I don't know, could be anything. It doesn't have to be like, global peace, or, it could just be good people doing good things. But to know that about yourself and to seek it out and make sure it's in your portfolio is really what people might miss when you get into automatic pilot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you for
Let's,
sharing.
let's face it, this entire group, we're too old not to spend our time with people that we respect
Mm.
and that we like, and who have a sense, hopefully, of shared purpose.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a luxury. But anyway, it's just, it's like you don't want to spend time with people who you don't respect. So anyway, Professor Goldstein, whom I've known for many years now, and Steve is. We've known each other for 25 plus years, and I love Steve because he's a very down to earth guy. Like me, immigrant parents or grandparents, and from New York. And Steve is not afraid to say, "There's an elephant in the room. Did anyone notice this elephant in the room?" And I introduced him, we put him on a board of directors and introduced him to a friend of mine from UVA, and how they wrote a book together, which is Why Are There Snowblowers in Miami? When he was running Sears consumer credit businesses, you Discover Card and all that, and he went into a store in Miami, and they had like snow removal equipment. He said, "Why are these here?" So he asked the common sense questions and has common sense answers. And I love the guy. So, and he'll tell you a little bit, his journey of big company, small company, fostering entrepreneurship, working with private equity. I mean, he's really had a spectrum of experience. I'll leave it to you, Professor Goldstein.
Well, thank you for the promotion. I didn't know, I barely got through school. I didn't know I ever became a professor. The first thing I'm going to say is much of what I'm going to say is going to echo what Deb said in a little different way, but thematically, a lot of the points she made, I'm going to cover as well. I'll sort of say at the beginning that the process that I'll describe quickly, the process I went through, which is probably more interesting to people than my background. I realized that this is really more about the ride than the destination. We're at a point in our lives where we've all accomplished a lot, and there's a lot we want to do, or hopefully want to do. And I realized pretty quickly, it's not about doing something. It's figuring out more programmatically and in a portfolio kind of way, what are the things that I would like to do and be, useful and meaningful and continue learning and all of that stuff. And the word, that always comes back is change. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I've always loved change. I love the excitement of change. I love the unknown. I love discovering new things. I even like when things don't work, because you learn something oftentimes more from failure than from success. And so to me, the process of doing change is really exciting. And obviously most people hate change. And in my advisory practice, I coach leadership teams and CEOs about why change is not a bad word. So one of my messages tonight for all of you is change is your friend. It's not your enemy. To me, rewinding the tape, if you think of life as a movie, rewinding the tape and looking at it backwards, it all seemed pretty simple. But when I was going through it, it was anything but simple. And like many people, I didn't really have a plan. when I got out of business school. I got a job. I didn't like it. I changed jobs. I was probably a millennial, Deb, for about 3 minutes. And once I got into the sort of mainstream, I basically wound up staying at several companies for some time. I was with Citicorp for 7 years and American Express for 15 years. And then I went to Sears, which the best thing that happened with that is I got a story to write the book about. These positions were a combination of hard work, success, luck, right place, right time. There were setbacks, sometimes going sideways, sometimes going backwards. And the last sort of real job I had was with a consulting firm called Alvarez and Marsal, where I ran the financial services practice of the firm. And so this goes back now maybe 5.5 years ago. But before I do, let me just stop a second. Most of my colleagues and friends throughout this whole period were talking about retirement. And many of them were talking about it longingly, wistfully, like, this is great, we're going to retire. And I frankly never understood that. I didn't know what that meant, other than you stop working. And I like to work, so I didn't know what I would do. Even when I was in my 40s, why are all these people talking about retirement? So about 5.5 years ago, when I was still at Alvarez, I started to think about, what do I really want to do? And Diana calls it the third act. I called it the third chapter, but it's the same thing. And, the way I came up with this is very simple. I figured the first act is from the time you're born till you get out of school, whatever level you go through. The second act is you get married, you have kids, you deal with life's up and downs. And, at the end of that period, you find yourself taking care of your parents with all that entails. And then after that, what happens? And I didn't know, so I called it the third chapter. And as I started to think about it, I realized that, when you get to this point of the third chapter, you are the smartest you've ever been in your whole life. You know more people than you've ever known in your whole life. You have more experience than you've ever had in your whole life. And you probably have more money, than you've had. So that's pretty great, right? So how do you take that basket of fruit and make something out of it that's really, meaningful and important and purposeful and all those other things? So I realized that I was very good at doing business plans for the businesses I ran, but I had never done one for myself. I don't know why I never did, but I never did. And so I did the obvious thing, which is talk to a lot of people to find out what their plan was. And amazingly, I found out that of all the people I spoke to, only one person had a plan. Only one. And his plan, he used your word, Deb, threads. He said, I don't want to do one thing. I want to have a series of threads. And I said, I always thought thread was connected with sewing and knitting and stuff, but it seemed like a good way to think about it. And as he talked more about it, it seemed to me it was more like a list. And the one thing I knew I didn't want to do was come up with a list, because lists are easy. I make lists every day, but that's not really meaningful. So I started to really think about this a lot. And I found that it was very hard to do, because now I had to make a plan about myself. And I really had to ask myself some very soul-searching questions. So it took a while, but once I got going, it actually picked up some momentum. And I wound up with 7 threads, and I'll just go through them quickly. One is regarding work. I knew I wanted to continue working because I like working, but I knew that what was critical is that I had to control my schedule. And the only way I could control my schedule was to work for myself. I couldn't have a boss. I couldn't work for a company, because the performance demands the company makes on you, whatever level you are, and I've been a CEO a few times, you've got people calling you and asking you things all the time. So number one is I had to find something I could do from a work perspective. The second is I had been threatening to write a book for about 10 years. And I always assumed I didn't do it because I didn't have the time. I also realized one of the reasons I didn't do it, I didn't know what to write about. And that's a bad situation. And the only thing I knew is I didn't want to write a book about me. I didn't want to write a book about, my story, because everybody writes a book about their story. And I figured there were more interesting stories than mine. So I wanted to write a book that was meaningful and that people could learn from and use. The third thread was around health. I realized that my wife and I do a lot of traveling, and we're always on these trips. And there are a lot of people much older than we are who have great difficulty getting around. We were in Scandinavia a couple of years ago on a bike trip, and this big boat, this big cruise ship docked, and like 5,000 people got off this ship with walkers and wheelchairs, and they were going on a pretty aggressive, or they were going through the airport to go on this cruise. And I thought to myself, that must be really hard to do. And, as you get older, it's even harder. So the thing that I thought about is, of course, it's going to happen to all of us, but I want to prolong that as long as possible. So getting as healthy as I could get was something that it was important. Another one was traveling. And we love to travel. But again, when you have a full-time job, you really can't go away too long. It took me a long time to take 2 weeks off consecutively when I was working in traditional companies. And to me, a big trip was like a month. How do you do that? So that was something we wanted to do. And the next one was photography. I always loved photography, and would say I was probably a decent amateur photographer, but I really wanted to learn how to take great pictures, how to do post-production with Lightroom and Photoshop, and really create images that would, make a statement. When I was a kid, I played the saxophone, and I stopped when I went to college. I really don't know why I stopped. I just stopped. And so I picked it up again 3 years ago, and realized I forgot how to read music. I forgot everything. So I'm really starting like almost an infant. And the last thing, which has proven to be the most challenging, is I was looking for some kind of social cause that I could really put my shoulder into. And I had been on a number of not-for-profit boards, and your impact on those is pretty minimal. And they basically want money. And so I decided that I would be willing to put in money in something, but I wanted to be involved in something that, that really gave me meaning and purpose in terms of I could take everything I've done and all that I know and help whatever that social cause is. So, I mean, so I put that plan together. I typed it up. I discussed it extensively with my wife and kids. They all signed off on it.
Love it. The board of approval.
Yeah, I got to get approval. And I've been working at it, pretty well for the last, 5.5 years. And I must say that I'm actually surprised that almost everything besides the social philanthropy thing has not happened yet. It will, but it hasn't. But everything else really has. I mean, I had to speak to Mr. Alvarez and tell him what my plan was. And he said, oh, well, you could work part-time, and part-time to him was 3 days a week. I said, I'm thinking about 1 day a month. And so, we settled on like 2 days a month. And that worked out for
Steve. It's like it's wading into the lake. It like you go in and say, well, it looks cold, right?
Right.
And I go to my ankles, and then it's
right.
It's not so cold.
Right.
And it's like when the company we put you in touch with,
right.
And they said, Steve, would you help us vet this deal? He said, yes. They do the deal. Would you be on the board? Yes. Would you be chairman? Yes. Would you be interim CEO? Yes. You know, and you sort of, as you engage with stuff, you know, and you can add something, you know, you've done it time and time again. And I mean, I've seen it, and, you know, everybody.
Can I ask a question? Because one of the things I love that, you know, you're both threading together here is the power of intention,
Right.
and the power of, you know, you call it a plan. You're a lifelong, you know, corporate business person. That's the vernacular that you
Right.
use. But for those of us, and for those people here tonight that aren't in business, it's really about intention. It's a
Yes.
clear sense of A, what you want, B, and once it's in you, these things, as I say to people, it's almost like the universe lines it all up in front of you. And I'm not sure if that you felt that way, Steve, but it sounds like it, you know, you followed a beautiful path and your plan. So I love it.
So Diana, I think sorry, Kerry, I think you know, the point that, and I should have said this before, and I learned this at Alvarez, is that the real question, you don't have to be a business person, to your point. Anybody can do this. The key question that people have to ask, and I ask this every day, is why?
Yep.
The what is easy. You know, it's the why. I mean, the reason I chose to pick up the saxophone is I had no delusions that I was going to get a band together and play with Sting, much as I would love to. You know, but because that would have a defined, that would be a job, right? Because I'd have to hit certain milestones to get sufficiently good that someone would audition me and compete against guys who have been playing their horns for 40 years. So it would, you know, it would be dead on arrival. And,
So,
go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. One of the things I wanted to do, you're so inspiring, and your words and your experience are so inspiring. I just want to keep a little bit of mind to the time and be able to get to a place that we can, because I see all these faces that are sort of engaging with what you're saying, and I'm hoping you're going to be inspiring some really good sharing, and I think people will probably have a lot more questions. Okay. So I'm sorry.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
So bringing this right up to the moment, tonight, I'm sure everybody's going to watch the debate, hopefully with a lot of liquor. In light of everything going on around us, this might be a good time to start your third chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would suggest to all of you to think about tomorrow morning, starting whatever process you define that works for you. You know, take your first step. You don't have to do the whole plan, but start it, and you'll see that, you know, pretty soon you'll get some traction.
Well, let me introduce Pedro Caceres, the good whom I'm a huge fan, and he is so positive. And Pedro's from Spain and studied in Barcelona, and in here, and I love his energy, his passion, and we got together recently. He has run operations for big toy companies, and he's a process guy, but he's also a passionate leadership guy, and is now with a company that has been killing it in the pet supply industry. And I always love being with him because he's so positive, and he also has a way to speak about what I would call the moral imperative to continue learning.
Wonderful.
of, hey, you know, if you're not moving forward, you know, if you're not a shark, you know, you're not moving forward, you're dead. And he embodies that. So Pedro,
Great to
kick
have
off.
you, Pedro. Yes.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me well?
Yeah, we have.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with two interesting facts so we connect emotionally here. The first one is I know I have a 2-degree of separation from all of you because you have always in your life, I'm 100% sure that you have played Monopoly. So I was the guy running the factory making Monopoly for many years.
Wow.
Nice.
So you are connected
you.
somehow to me.
Thank you.
Or you played
Back then,
Trivial
another one of those little battleships.
Oh,
I missed
Scrabble,
it.
yes, and Scrabble, and all those beautiful games. I run that factory, a humongous factory in Massachusetts for many years. So I know I'm connected to you. There's a second piece of information that's going to connect me to you. So I now, not with all of them, but I live with 5 women. So I have a wife and four daughters. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind when I speak around all these things, because, and the last thing that you need to understand about me is this: I was born in Spain. My first job was in Paris, France. Then I moved to the US and I ran companies that were set in China. So in 2016, just 1 year, that year, I took a plane 228 times in 1 year. So all these things are in the context behind of whatever I have to say now, because I mean, I haven't still paused to think about my life and what is next. I haven't had the time through all these years just to do that. I'm in the middle of all these things. I'm in the crest of the tide and the wave and just riding this as I go. But I realized that I'm very close to a point in my life that we have to think what I do next. I'm very close to be 60 years old. So just put me that in that age, right? Through my life, from wanting to be a lawyer to becoming a master engineer, to go and work in France, to move to a consultant, to move to the auto industry, to go to games in the US, to move to consultant. So at one moment in time, I said, I never actually had a job. I had assignments, and all my life is about the assignments I had. So this idea of you are connected to a company forever and all those things just got out of my mind very, very soon. That I'm just accepting the assignment at hand that I had, and as long as it fits me and it fits what I do, that is the assignment that I'm responsible for, extremely committed to, and try to make very successful. But this concept of a person getting a job in a company and developing a career, all those things, it's never, ever clicked my mind. But every assignment I did and every assignment I'm doing, and my assignment that I have today, I'm doing with based on a very clear foundation. That foundation wasn't defined the first day. And that's, I think, what Kerry is talking about. Through my life, I see 2 things happening. One is complexity is being reduced. Somehow, my life was extremely complex when I was 40, 50. Then I realized that was not fulfilling all my interests, personal interests and professional interests. And I decided to start focusing those things into simple, very clear goals that I go after. And I'm simplifying. If I had too many things of something, I just decided that I didn't need that much. The material possessions were not fulfilling my inner needs, and simplifying. And I keep simplifying, and I will keep simplifying. The second thing is opening, in that simplification, my ability to contribute to human development. When I'm running a company, I'm providing jobs to thousands of people, to all their families, to the suppliers that supplies us, the indirect people and their families. At one moment in time, when I was at hospital, I looked at myself in the mirror and said, 25,000 people depend today on what you're going to say. So you better say it right.
Mm.
And I still do the same. Every time I do what I call strategic thinking. Every day I think what I'm going to do the next 5 years. Every day. So, and I remind myself that I'm responsible for my actions. I'm responsible for everybody I touch. I'm responsible for the indirect people that connect and their families around that. I feel that responsibility as something very positive for me. In that foundation, I have a foundation of knowledge, and Kerry knows this. I never stop learning, and I'm now into artificial intelligence, and I want to develop that field even more and farther. And Kerry knows the crazy things I'm doing in financial investments and all those things, and extremely interesting stuff, right? But a foundation of knowledge. And I always told my daughter, you can be whatever you want, but there are there's a square around your brain. That is square I want you for you to develop. Is the square of managing people, of managing finance, of managing technology, and speaking other languages and cultures. That is square I want you around your brain. You want to be a marketing person? And my oldest daughter was managing the Corona beer brand in Mexico, all international stuff. So that square of knowledge all the time on those things. I don't care you're an engineer as my second one, or marketing or whatever. It's just finance, managing people, managing technology, and speaking other language, being able to communicate with other people and understand the emotional connection of the conversation. The second thing is the foundation of globalization, the deep understanding of human dignity of every single person. That's why the conversation yesterday about ageism and ableism, for me, is the dignity of the human person as the foundation of my entire social system, right? And the third thing on the foundation is the globalization in people. And the last thing, I have to say this because I speak to universities. I like talking to young people. I'm in the board of advisors to one. I was in the board of advisors in a business school. And I always tell them the same thing. I cannot separate myself from my science, my faith, being from the reason, rational being. I cannot separate science from religion. I can't separate the professional life from the personal life. I'm one, integral. This is who I am. And I want to reflect myself like this in everything I do. And it's not that you put those things together and a thermonuclear reaction happens inside yourself. Right? I can't just decide who am I now? How am I reacting to this? What is the aspect of me that I'm one, right? And in that one, the foundation of faith is extremely important. Extremely important. And it's something that Kerry has always respected from me. I know and I want to learn more because I have the capacity to do it. Because I have the ability to learn fast and apply those things effectively, I have to use the talents that I have been given. If I don't do that, I will be dishonoring my faith. So I take that as my responsibility as a leader to develop people, to be the best I can, and to do it the best I can to make sure that they can grow. And that ties into my religious foundation, 100%. Tied to that, the dignity of human being, solidarity, and the common good. And they had the foundation of my moral compass that actually ties into the social doctrine of my religion, right? But extremely important. And I'm very proud of saying this. I don't have any issues at all or problem to tell you that I lead companies to success, and we're having a heck of a good year. And Kerry knows that we're killing it out there and creating so much employment and so successful. And everybody knows that everything emanates from my real caring about them developing as a person.
That's
And
beautiful.
when I connect that, it's very powerful, and the untapped possibilities of everybody just shines through, and it happens. So
That's beautiful.
Pedro is the sort of guy who emboldens people to be creative in a business setting, because he's so positive. And you know, I've seen it, and you walk around and he's like, he knows everybody's name, you know. Is that the sort of guy? And genuinely cares. And you know, you lead by example, right?
One of the things that's, you know, we talked about threads, and the common thread that I'm hearing from all of you is, and even though Pedro, you said, you know, you haven't had a time to think about your third act or your next step, but you know your why. Your thread is with you, and
Yes.
and you follow it through the way you run your company. So there's no separation. So I
There's no
love
separation.
hearing that from each of you. But I would like to invite people to either open up your mic and say, I have a question or a thought, or you can type in the chat box if you have a question.
I've really enjoyed this so far, but what struck me was when it was mentioned that most people didn't have a plan, because I always call it a 16-year sentence at IBM. And then when they first started laying people off in their history, my department was fine, but they were offering buyouts. So I took a buyout and started a consulting firm for like 20 years. And I didn't really have a plan. And my father was a real plan man. And I was like, well, I know there's demand for what I do. I taught a lot of corporate education by the time I was sunsetting my career at IBM. And so I tried to put together like this little presentation for my father so he wouldn't ride my you know what. And it was a pseudo plan, I'd call it. And so I went over to his house, and you know, he poured us each a shot of Jack Daniels, and I sat down and told him how I wanted to leave IBM. And I thought he was going to resist, and it wasn't PowerPoint. IBM used freelance back then. So I had a little freelance presentation. I gave it to him, and he said, sounds good. I was like, oh, okay. And I had a really good run for like 20 years. But all along, it was just, I loved to teach. So, and I was very good at it because, you know, they made you have evaluations and all that business. But as my father's age advanced and he had Alzheimer's pretty bad, I was sick of being on a plane. So when Pedro talked about being on a plane, most of my corporate education, I went to the client. So I was always on planes. And my father was deteriorating, and I was like, I can't do this. So, and I had a stepmother, but you know, she was aged and had balance problems and different things. So I started to sunset my consulting business, and I was taking care of my father. Well, my father died, and a couple of years later, but I loved helping to take care of him. I mean, it didn't bother me that he'd tell me the same story over and over. I always act like it was the first time I heard it. And I was just like, I just love old people. So after my father died, a friend of mine said, where have you been? Your car's never in the driveway. So I was taking care of my father pretty much every day. She said, well, my mother just got out of the hospital with a hip replacement. We're looking for somebody to care for her. And I was like, oh, I love old people. So I started taking care of old people, but I'm also shocked at what the people were willing to do that helped take care of my father, because it was like they would sit there and watch TV with him. And that's just not who I am. I was like, give me something to do. And I happened to be what my father would call his eighth son, because he had 7 sons. And I'm handier than any of the 7 boys. So when I was at people's houses and it was like, your faucet's leaking, let's put on a new faucet. Well, blah, blah, blah. Can you install a garbage disposal? Can you do this? Can you do that? And most things I could do. And if I didn't know how to do them, guess where I went? YouTube. And so now I have this little business, and I have to be honest to say I don't charge enough because they are old, and I know a lot of them just live on Social Security, but it's called Lady Fix It. And old people love having a woman come in to repair things and hang the chandelier and fix the toilet. And they feel so less intimidated, I think, or frightened. So I've sort of fallen into this weird, sometimes I help babysit some old people, but I'm usually 99% of my clients are quite old, and I'm their Lady Fix It. And they call me, I having a flood, the pipe broke, I'm doing
my
some
gosh.
damage. And so I really enjoy it, but I have to find a way to make more money because I'm not somebody that needs a lot, but I don't make enough money on my old people.
Yeah, and
So I really
you know, you go back to the, how do you have a portfolio of activity where, you know, your economic needs are met and your needs to contribute back, since we've, you know, by and large, we've been, you know, obviously I know you, I mean, I feel we've been enormously blessed with our family, notwithstanding whatever the issues are. You know, we've had a loving extended family, but how do you give something back? And that's, you know, no.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful story. We actually have a few questions lined up. So I will ask you in the interest of time, I want to give everybody enough opportunity to voice their stories and their questions. So I hate to feel sometimes like I'm hurrying you along, but I really am anxious. We've got a number of people that have some interesting things to share.
My observation question, and it involves something that I'm pursuing now that, again, Diane knows a little bit about. It involves really trying to bring people together to affect change, to embrace change. And what I'm grappling with, I think we all have our different challenges in the era of COVID, but it's how do I justify, you know, some of my, I don't say selfish, but some of my very Diane-centric plans when I feel like there's just, and some of it is being the bridge generation. I don't have children, but I have a 92-year-old mother with whom I spend a lot of time helping her. But I'm excited and eager and kind of chomping at the bit to get going with my big project. But I'm also feeling like there's just so much. There's so much need. There's so much chaos. And always grappling with that. So maybe other people have ideas of how we can be, I don't know, give yourself permission to go off on that great new path.
So Deb, I see your finger raised. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I have to just say that this is so fabulous because Maura discovered she's a first responder and she just needs publicity, right? We got to get articles on her. And, oh my God, it's fantastic. And Diane, and it's almost overwhelming if you try to think of all the things that you'd like to lend your skill set to or that you really care about. But a lot of times it's about scale. So you could scale something up. For example, you could say, I'd like to help people, with COVID in my neighborhood, in the United States, in the world. Or you could scale it down to say, I just would like people to start wearing masks. And maybe there's something I could do. So look at scale, like look at something that you're interested in and scale it back down and make it small, because there's things that cause things that you can tackle that don't have to be world peace, that don't have to be, it happens a lot just because I do this innovation class at Columbia, and the kids always start off with save the planet, you love your fellow man, these very grandiose things. And then we get them down to like, how could the scaffolding look better in my neighborhood? And you end up drilling down on something that you can affect. So think about scale, and by all means, at another time, if you want to connect and work on it together. But I think that's really interesting, and a lot, just so you know, that's an issue in innovation. A lot of people hit that, and there's actually techniques of how to get it to a place where it's something that's of you, that you're able to articulate, that you're able to get others to care about, but it's on the right
And
scale
let,
and perspective.
let me weigh in and just give a shout out to Diane. And we were classmates as well. And she's done a thing called Who's, HOOS, for Change, which is creating a forum for civil debate about politics. And stop me if I'm misstating this. For civil debate and positive change, and that there's an opportunity for a platform to have reasonable exchange of ideas. Would that be?
It's certainly the original iteration, which I launched in 2017, and it's evolving. And now I think this is where I'm feeling great excitement, and I see the potential. People are hungering for not just, we get connection on Zoom, but people want to feel that they are contributing, that they are effective. We can talk and talk and talk, but it comes down to doing and putting things into action. And that's what, again, you were just saying, Deb, my challenge has always been focus. How do I focus? And a lot of it is accountability and having these conversations. And so again, Diana, I just am so thrilled with this community that you're building and bringing people together. The life of the mind, the life of the mind can be translated into action. And that's what I'm really trying to do.
Hey guys, yeah, thank you for putting this together. It's been wonderful. This is a question more for the group. So I'm sort of at the point, I'm definitely between my second and third chapter, having left the high-tech business. I was in high-tech sales for about 25 years, and I recently left that world to go into the world of sustainability and pursuing a master's. And I find that it's great. It's one of these, do good, do well type of areas that I'm pursuing. And I've gotten great joy out of it, but there's no question it's a new area and it's a new mindset. And so even though I think, Steve, you had alluded to the fact that we all, we know a lot of people as we move along, I'm now moving to a completely different world in a way and having to shift gears. And I'm curious from a group perspective, if you've shifted gears and have you found yourself opening up to a new group to make that happen as you get through it?
Well, I think the short answer is yes. I mean, especially if you're really enjoying what you're doing, and it sounds like you are. I mean, if you weren't liking it, the challenge would be huge. But right. if you really are engaged in what you're doing,
yes,
there must be some people who you've come across and will come across who are resources you can utilize to help you think through how and where you can play in some of these possibilities. And I think, it's funny. You never know who the next person you're going to meet is going to have the key to the door you want to get into. And unfortunately, you got to find a lot of keys, right? Yeah. It's sort of a numbers game, unless you get very lucky. And the first person you speak to about this says, "Oh, I've been looking for someone like you. This is great." It can happen. It never happened to me like that, but I do know some people with whom it's happened. And so a lot of it's persistence, being creative, reaching out to other people, because I mean, like Pedro said, we're all connected because we all played Monopoly. Well,
right.
That's not as crazy as it sounds. We're all somehow, we know someone who knows someone. And that was one of the points I made before, that, because we're older, we've met and known a lot more people. And maybe one of those people can help you, find the right outlet you're looking for, at least to get started,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I also would like to add to this is we have to be smart about how to use social media, how the boundaries of communication have just been shattered, right?
Mm.
So I just put an example to you. I'm extremely interested in doing mathematical research. That's something that I've never shared with anybody and never did it before. And that I knew I can do things that interested me, and I couldn't share with anybody I knew. None of the people in my network, zero, would just entertain with me a conversation. Oh, hey, you want to talk about this? Zero. And I found people in Australia, Germany, and Canada, some people in Latin America, and I'm part of that community. And now I'm publishing things in mathematical reviews, right? So you had something to share. Open yourself, and you find somebody out there.
That's right.
No, absolutely. And I would agree. And the one thing, it's not even a major challenge, but because all of a sudden things got shut down, you're limited. I would normally be taking courses on campus and getting to know the students face to face. In this situation, you're online. So it's a little bit different. But to your point, Pedro, I think you just have to really explore things like LinkedIn. And I have been doing that. You do Zoom meetings with people in all parts of the world. But I think it's almost trying to find that core group locally too, that I've got to start figuring out within the New England area.
So one example, I created a group on LinkedIn. I wanted to share some things about some ideas in business, right? I have 1,352 people.
Wow.
That joined that group, and now it's just busy and fun, right? And I thought that I was going to be me and 5 more.
Wow. That's great. That's great to know. That's a great idea.
Okay. Any limits that we believe in, we made them happen to make them real. So don't limit yourself. Do not.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to echo that too, Pedro, and say that there's a different spirit of support. I think that emerges in us all as we age. There's such a much more competitive zone, I feel like, not just for men, not just for women, but for any of us, especially in businesses and things. There's such a competitive time in the middle of your lives. And as you pass 50, I feel like there's a lot more openness to sharing and support. And I would say just never be held back from reaching out to someone you admire and someone you respect, because people are very open to supporting and helping you. So.
Yes. And then at the end, I said, I'm simplifying. One of the things I had to simplify is my mental models for things. This idea that I don't need, I let go your need to be right. Let go your need. This is Wayne Dyer, and you probably heard this. Let go those 5 things and just let them go. There's nothing can happen, because you do that, you live happier, and you are who you are, and you share what you know, and you try to do things the best. And whoever wants to take it is their own responsibility, not yours. Right. So I'm going to say something to
be right. That's a very good. Good.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something to what Steve said before. Nobody likes change, right? But it's just very funny. When I talk to always, I use this sentence. I tell people, everybody hates permanent change, right? But everybody likes continual improvement, which is exactly the same.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Continual improvement, yes. I mean, absolutely, yes. Of course, it's exactly as permanent change. It's the same words, synonyms, right? Sometimes words matter as well. That's what I'm trying to say here, that sometimes these ideas and things, we use many words in our life so far, and we know which ones work, which ones don't. And it's very important that we use the proper words to engage.
There's no way of knowing the experiences and the life. Mara, I loved what you shared, the sort of path of your life. I know a few of you we've already connected around that, but for those of you that are, have been less vocal, I want to open this up to share perhaps a different path. Maybe you haven't been lifelong in a corporate world or in an executive type position. Perhaps you have been on the front lines in medicine or as a teacher. Perhaps you're someone, and this will transition to what we'll be talking a little bit with Rebecca, who's our next presentation in a few moments, but there are a number of people, and predominantly women, that you know, pursue careers and take time off to raise families, and you know, in their 50s, upon being an empty nester, reinvent themselves and start a business or try to get back in the workplace. Before we transition over to Rebecca, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what she's going to be doing with us this evening, I wanted to thank Kerry and Pedro and Deb and Steve. And before we sign off, if there's anything else you want to, any other pearls of wisdom, you've been really gracious with your sharing and your openness and your support. But anything else you want, any pearls you want to cast before we transition, I'd love to hear that.
It's great that you've enabled us to have this, and you know, I'm really thankful that Deb and Steve and Pedro have you know, shared their life experiences, and you know, if we can, you know, anybody wants to reach out by email, whatever.
Wendy has actually put your LinkedIn profiles here in the chat. And so you can learn a little bit more about each of these folks. I also just have a message from Jean Crouch.
I missed much of the presentation tonight. Those corporate requirements were just beating away on me, but comment that I wanted to echo that Deb made about scaling what it is that you want to do. And I think what goes along with that is leveraging what others have already done. There are so many organizations that are doing great work already, and to put one's own resources into reinventing a structure of a nonprofit corporation or whatever is, there's just too much work to do to spend time on that, in my opinion, unless you're really doing something, you know, that nobody else is doing. There's a lot of infrastructure in place, and we need to leverage it because the world has a lot of deep needs. So thank you for those comments, Deb. I thought it was great.
Thank you. You're absolutely right.
I'll just throw in one thing, and that is, you know, sometimes people come to me because I've spent my career in the executive search business. What are you good at? What do you like to do? What are you not good at? What do you not like to do? And think of it as a quadrant, you know, and you want to be in the upper right quadrant of I'm good at and I like to do. And it'll lead, it's a creative, you know, it's almost like free association writing, you know, where you just write down anything. And think about that and get to the upper right quadrant of what am I good at and what do I like to do. And sometimes, you know, you like Steve is a good one example, you know, turnaround guy. That's not really a lot of fun, you know, generally, because you're always at odds with people. And it'll free you up to think about stuff that's not immediately tangent to your industrial experience, or maybe even your functional experience. But it can liberate you. So think about that. I mean, do a Sunday night, you know, the kids are in bed, whatever, you know, your version of that is. But the free exercise of let me be, we're at a point in life where we want to be in the upper right quadrant.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Kerry. And it's, you know, it's actually a beautiful segue to Rebecca's presentation coming up. So again, thank you all. I welcome you to stay on, and I hope you can, but recognize that some folks may be gearing up for the debates, but I do encourage you to all stay on for this next, it's going to be a little bit different kind of experience. we're hoping that it'll be part, Rebecca's going to share some thoughts and stimulating ideas and ultimately some exercises that we'll do together, sort of live on Zoom. And then we'll hopefully share with each other after a period of a couple of minutes of introspection. So I hope you'll stay on. But before I get into what she's going to speak of, I just want to introduce her a little bit more formally. I've known Rebecca for, I was counting, almost 30 years. We've seemed to lead relatively parallel lives. We met in Boston with Businesses for Social Responsibility in the late 80s. She was with Environmental Futures, part of Citizens Energy. I had a small cause marketing consulting firm. I went on to work in the early days of the internet at America Online. She started what I would say was actually the first online e-commerce company I'd ever heard of, called museumshop.com. So she's done so many interesting things in her life, and like me, at a certain point jumped off the corporate, I call it, the crazy times of the corporate life, to focus on raising children. And that period of time for both of us, and I would love to say for you, Rebecca, was rewarding, but at the same time has been challenging, as some of you that may sit on this call tonight. Our third acts coincide with maybe having a job during this period, maybe not, but really and honestly having a clean slate of an empty nest, but at a time that it's more challenging for us to get jobs. So what Rebecca's going to do is take us through a process. And Rebecca, actually, just to back up a little bit, Rebecca is a mentor and a business consultant for female founders. Not just newly started companies for women re-entering the workplace, but many of them are. But for the unifying thread through all of them, they're all female founders, and she helps to work with them on a holistic vision, not just for their job, for their business and their bottom line, but for their whole lives, how it relates to their family, their heart, and their decisions, and their path in life. I love what she does, and I'm thrilled to have her here. I'd ask her to come and share a process she works on or uses with her business owner clients, but it's most certainly extremely broad and applicable to all of us. And the title of the program that she's going through tonight, and that she does with a number of people online and in person, is called Harness Your Genius and Eliminate Barriers Holding You Back. And, we talked a lot tonight about recognizing our gifts or our passions, whatever you want to call them, and trying to refine and figure out ways to put them into place. And so she's going to help us and take us through some really interesting exercises. Most of us are at times in our lives, whether it be the stresses of jobs or now the pandemic, but we become disconnected from this vision for our lives. Introducing Rebecca Reynolds-Moore. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everybody. It's a real honor to be here, and thank you, everyone who's spoken. I've taken copious notes because it's just a lot of what you said is just mirrored in what I'm about to say, specifically the upper right quadrant. I don't call it that, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. Diana and I have a very similar process for what we do with our clients. And I just wanted to share a little bit of that process and get to the big question about what is holding you back. And one of the things that we work on with our clients is similar to this, the concept of the upper right quadrant, but really having you really sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and write out who and how you want to be in a number of different areas, personally, professionally, physically, leisure time. So although my clients are founders, they are really, they're interested because most of them are what I call mid-century moderns. They're 50 plus who have returned to the workforce, like myself, and maybe they've had a big career, but they are looking to do something that they have control over and that they enjoy. So they have a business idea, but they don't want to give up their life. So we go through this process, and inevitably, once you go through that process and get a little bit more clarity, you bump up into what I call barriers. And I can't see all of you, but maybe we can have a little show of hands of anybody who has really kind of bumped into, maybe it would be you get a panic attack, or you are trying to do something new and something happens. And so that's what I really want to talk about a little bit right now. So the biggest barrier really is invisible. And think of a barrier as an inner gauge or a thermometer or a set point, or sometimes it's called an upper limit. And that is really kind of, author Gay Hendricks coined the term upper limit. And it's the way you see the world, the way, what you feel comfortable with, or your comfort zone, and how much joy you allow yourself to have. The converse is how much suffering you allow yourself to have in your business. So have just a show of hands with the little blue hands there. How many of you have ever experienced a time when things were going well and you turn down the volume? Anybody? Any hands?
These aren't blue, but I'm raising my hand.
Things are not going well, and you kind of turn up the volume on your misery. So you're looking for, you're looking for sympathy or something like that. And the question here is, why don't we turn up the volume on enjoyment and turn down the volume on our misery and suffering? So the reason we do this is it has to do with your beliefs. And many of us have long held limiting beliefs. And I think Pedro was referring to this as well. And sometimes we can't help them. There are things that we do unconsciously that limit us from growing. And I run into this all the time with especially people who have had a big career in a certain area and are trying their hand at something new, and it's kind of scary because it's unknown. So what I'm going to be talking about really quickly, we're going to get to an exercise in about 30 seconds, is that once you can identify these limiting beliefs, you can really figure out and notice what is triggering them, and then you can make a change. We're going to do a quick exercise in our limited time here to look at limiting beliefs. And these are 4 very common limiting beliefs that entrepreneurs have, or people that are looking for what are they going to do in the next chapter of their life. So what I'd like you to do is to jot down, I'm going to describe these, and jot down on a piece of paper, or just make a note if anything sounds familiar to you or resonates for you. So one of the first most common limiting beliefs is feeling that you're fundamentally flawed. And Diane, I know that you had an example you were going to share about this.
Well, it's a personal example, and it relates to what we've spoken of several times tonight, which is that no matter what you know in your heart that you're capable of doing, and no matter what you've achieved in your life in your past, and especially for those of us who take a break from their career, and in my case, that's where it becomes personal. Re-entering, I started a business before Third Act Quest that I ended up having to close. I got ill a few years ago and I ended up having to close. But in the process of starting that business, it seemed as though I didn't have any of that expertise and wisdom that I knew I had. I was incredibly intimidated and almost shaky in the way I presented in the world. And it was so painful emotionally, but also I think fundamentally flawed. I felt like I was fundamentally flawed. I wasn't capable. And, I completely ignored what I had done in the past.
Other things that I've heard, that's a great example. And other things I've heard of that people feel like they're past their prime, or they don't have anything to contribute, or they feel like they need to go back to school, even though they had a PhD, and they have a ton of experience. So that's just one of the very common and limiting beliefs. The next one, I'm going to go through them real quickly, is disloyalty or abandonment. So an example of this, it would be a mother left a corporate job to spend some time with kids, and after, and this is actually a real example, after 3 years, she got an incredible offer, and it was just really difficult because she worried that her kids and husband would feel abandoned if she accepted this job, because she would have to travel a lot, or just because she would not be focused on them. A similar situation, they took the job, and then while on the job, they felt really guilty. And I'm going to talk about another example too. And when their children said, "Oh, Mom, how come you're not home?" then that was their unconscious bias that they were a bad mom. So they would take these examples of things and turn it into really kind of reinforcement that they were bad. Okay, so that's another example. And next is burden of success. And this sounds counterintuitive, but so some people decide not to pursue an opportunity, or they're afraid to do something in their third act because if it took off, then they might lose the lifestyle or lose things that they were used to. Okay. And on the flip side, they're afraid to try a new opportunity because if it doesn't work, they'll be ashamed. Okay. They'll feel like a loser. The next most common one is crime to outshine. And what this would be is, okay, so what I really want to do in my third act is to travel around the world solo, which is what I really crave deep in my heart. But my friends and family would be super jealous of me, and I would feel like I'm overly privileged, or, I was just super lucky and everyone would be jealous of me. Okay, so any of those resonate for any of you? We'd love to hear a story too. If something kept you from pursuing either, it could be a business opportunity or something in your third chapter that's holding you back because you are having one of these.
Rebecca, this is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Two of them actually, but the one that really hit me was the burden of success. And I am just starting a new thing after having started several new things. And so it makes no sense. It is totally illogical. But I think, if this really took off, I would lose all of that lovely free time and the ability to set my own schedule. And I might have to, when it's possible again, to get back into traveling a lot. And when I really think about that, it makes no sense. I mean, it's just totally illogical because I'm so far away from that happening. It's like I used to, when I was in corporate, I did a lot of training and development. And supervisors and managers used to say to me, if I start praising people, they'll get big heads. And I said to them, you've got a long way to go before you need to worry about doing it too much. And so I feel like it's sort of the same thing. But when you said that, that did strike me.
Great example, Sarah. Anyone else?
Hi, Rebecca. Yeah, for me, it's this fear of losing freedom. So I guess that's a burden of success too. And this goes all the way back to my childhood. I just crave the ability to move freely, but I do care about doing meaningful things. So I end up joining committees, taking on tasks, being the chair of this or the leader of that. So I was just running a list down. I probably have 15 things I'm involved with right now. And so I end up getting overwhelmed. So I'm very busy and doing meaningful things, but I don't feel satisfied.
Got it.
And I do lose some of my freedom because I'm burdened by all these things I do, none of which are money-making ventures. And I do have a consulting job that I get hired to do things from an outside agency, but I don't allow myself to make that grow, because again, I feel like that will cost me freedom. I just work with a few existing clients, which is extremely lovely. But why don't I want it to grow? And why am I spending all this time doing these other things? And it all goes back to freedom, which I think I have, but I really don't.
Well, Rebecca, also, I'd love for you to delve in a little bit more, if you don't mind, about this inner thermostat, because these things are sort of logical, like if I do, if this, then that kind of fears, but there is something also just sort of subconscious to us that sets our, sets our inner thermostat at a certain level that we don't allow ourselves to go over in terms of achieving joy or success. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Basically, we have, we've developed neural pathways over, 50 plus years that have kind of convinced us of certain things. And that is what we're getting at here. So in my case, I don't like to put a spotlight on myself. And that's because I was brought up with not in an environment where you're not supposed to, toot your own horn. Okay. So that's just an example. And so when I realize that, I can say, oh, okay, there it is again. That's ridiculous. In order to get my next client, I need to toot my own horn. I need to get out there. So, there are many, many examples of what you're holding yourself back and why are you pushing that button of limitation. And so part of it is really just kind of getting aware of them and putting a name on them, and then calling them for the bullshit they are. Sorry, French. To actively dissolve that limiting belief, kind of dig in, figure out what is causing it. And that's why I put this quote on here, which Diana shared at one of her third act quests, which was fabulous. And it's, you don't become what you want, you become what you believe. And I'm actually going back to what Pedro was saying about believing and having a vision for what it is that you want to do. I'm going to go, some of the things that can trigger you or just kind of clues are when you get attention, you feel uncomfortable. That might be a clue that you have a limiting belief about being in the spotlight or getting recognition. A lot of people have money triggers. So, so an example would be you've been offered a fabulous, say you've got a new proposal, you put out a proposal, you were offered fabulous money for your work, or you received a bonus, and you're just uncomfortable with that. Maybe they're offering you more money than you're comfortable taking because of something. For some reason, you don't feel that you're worth that. That would be a money mindset or limiting belief about money. Appreciation would be someone expresses appreciation for your work or gives you a great testimonial and you bury it. You don't put it on your website, or you don't tell anyone about it. Maybe you're feeling uncomfortable about receiving appreciation or love. Breakthroughs, another common trigger. So say you just had a breakthrough in your work or in your third act, you have something that's just a fabulous idea. And actually, Tori, this is something kind of resonates a little bit. So you have a wonderful new opportunity and you're just kind of uncomfortable with it. So you self-sabotage and you do something so that you're not prepared for the meeting, or you take on too many things so that you can't focus on the ones that you really appreciate. I'm not I'm not trying to put you on, I'm just saying that's a common trigger. And then another trigger is anxiety. So I'm laughing about this because this is me. For those entrepreneurs who are super, super imaginative, sometimes that can really hurt you because you're so imaginative that you're imagining all the possible things that could go wrong instead of all the possible things that could go right. And you really want to get in the frame of mind that you're thinking of all the things that could go right. Okay, and but that is a common trigger that's telling you something. It's giving you information that you may be having a limiting belief. So very quickly, how do you begin to transform yourself? So identify and dissolve your limiting beliefs. Notice and address any triggers or barriers, like I talked about. And then really look at your upper quadrant. Manage your energy. Embrace your genius. I'm not going to have time to talk about managing your energy and taking action, because I want to do this next quick exercise. If you had 4 zones of genius, okay, the first zone, and this is something I learned from Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap, it's an old book, but it's still very relevant, that if you were to kind of do an audit or an assessment of all the activities that you're doing today, like just look at today or look at your past week, what do you spend your time doing? And you can jot down on a piece of paper and just do this really easily yourself. But really, what do you do daily? List all of the things that you do. In the first zone is in your zone of incompetence. So it's the things that you really are not good at, and might be bookkeeping or things that you're not good at, but you continue to do, even though they don't yield results and you don't really have any talent for. So it seems obvious, and for anyone who's a corporate executive, you probably have this one nailed, but delegate or automate, or just eliminate it from your time. The zone of competence is all those things that you're really competent in, but others can do just as well. So for me, it would be social media, for small businesses. That's a great thing to delegate. But I continue, you continue to do it even though, because you continue to do it because it's cheaper to do it yourself, you think, all right? But it's a bit of a trap. And I find entrepreneurs do this a lot in the beginning when they're bootstrapping. They're doing everything themselves because they're good enough at it. And, it's just cheaper because they don't want to spend money. But the problem is if you stay in this zone, it can lead to unfulfillment, and you can get really, really frustrated. Okay. And sometimes you can make yourself ill by spending too much time in this zone. The zone of excellence is those things that you do, and jot them down on your piece of paper, but those things that you do really well without much thought. Okay. So for me, that would be writing or analyzing. And I just, I do them typing. There are a lot of things around the house that I do really well that I do them without thinking. And this zone is very seductive because this is your comfort zone. So these are all the things that you do, you're comfortable with, and you're not really pushing yourself. Subconsciously, you feel the most comfortable here. So you're really not, your initial gut reaction is to not do much, to stay in the zone. And the zone of genius is what you can list all of those things that you're uniquely suited to do. Imagine when you're just in the flow and you just love it. You just lose track of time because you're just, you're just in the flow. And Diane, I've seen you when you're talking about a particular topic, you are in the flow. You are just, you are in your element when you're focusing on these aging issues. So what are those items that those actions that you just, when you're doing them, you are full of joy, all right? They're really your special gifts or your strengths and your inner calling. And those are they're even beyond your upper right quadrant. They're the things that you don't get to do as much as you'd like to do. And my point here in having you do this little exercise is that when you're doing things in your zone of incompetence or competence, you're limiting the time that could be spent on your genius zone. Okay.
So can I ask you a question? Because this has been plaguing me this last few weeks as I've been getting ready for this event, which has been very exciting for me. But I find myself, and I would love to see you guys raise your hand if you're like me. You wake up in the morning, and because we aren't, most of us aren't in offices right now, even if we're working, we're at our home. So it's a little harder to regulate our time, but you wake up and you have an intention to start, I got a call at 9, I've got, I want to write that email and contact this person, whatever your plan is for the day. I usually will come downstairs and inevitably a half hour later, instead of doing all the things I wanted to do in, let's say, my zone of excellence or genius, I'm in my zone of competence, cleaning the stove or something like that. I mean, that to me is my biggest aha moment where I go, okay, you're stonewalling, you're holding back from something. And is that sort of what that inner thermostat is? It's like I'm holding myself back from the thing I really love for some reason.
It can be. And I think that part of it sounds like simple prioritization of what you do, but it's more than that, because when you understand, when you've gone through the process of really deciding who you want to be as a person, like who and how you want to be, and that goes back to that much more in-depth exercise I was talking about before. Who is your persona? Who do you want to be? Then when you are doing some of the mundane thing, if you know that every day you want to do a little bit of each of those things. So I want to do a little bit, I want to do 4 hours a day of running my business. I want to do a couple hours a day of home, family stuff. I mean, you basically can prioritize what it is that you are doing. And when you're doing the mundane stuff, I'm listening to a podcast. So I'm actually in my categorization of what my like in my zone of genius. I love connecting ideas, thinking, learning. So I'm actually kind of multitasking. So when I'm in my zone of competence for something mundane, I'm doing something that's building out the other areas that are enriching me. Okay. But there are other times when I'm using those zones of incompetence as an excuse to do the thing I really need to do to get to the next level. The key point that I want to make here is that when you understand your upper limit, that you realize, wow, I have the ability to stop the amount of time in my day that I'm doing things that really aren't moving me forward towards my third act or towards the person I want to be or towards my priorities. And it kind of gives you the freedom to say, you know what, I'm gonna eliminate that, or I'm gonna do less of that. And I'm gonna spend more time doing the things that really, maybe it's only 10% of your day, but doing things that really lift my spirits and make me feel whole. And then taking a very, very active, taking concrete action to dissolve those limiting beliefs and notice the triggers before they happen. So that's is the tip of the iceberg for how to harness your genius and really understand some of the things that are holding you back so that you can take this next step to living a much more purposeful life in really using everything you've got, all your God-given gifts to make your life the best it can be. So that's just a little tidbit. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but my main point to you is I want to be encouraging to each of you. I mean, many of you here, that the speakers today have incredible careers, and it's marvelous to hear what it is that you have done and what you're doing. And a lot of people don't have as large a career, so they're reconciling their life to, okay, this is what I've got. How can I make the most of it? So my message to you is that you do have gifts to offer no matter where you are. You get to decide how you show up every day. And you get to decide how to change your beliefs. If something is holding you back, you actually can change it. And you can decide how to spend the rest of your life. And I do encourage you to, and this is my little pitch for Diana, take a look at Third Act Quest. She's done a marvelous job. She has fabulous programs for people who are feeling kind of stuck and really want to like chew on this and figure it out. And if you want to reach me, this is my contact information. I am having an accelerator next month for small business owners, and we're collaborating to grow together. I have a whole program coming up on that over the next 6 months. And we're really addressing those folks who have perhaps been hit pretty hard with COVID and really want to wrap up 2020 in the best way possible and give it all they've got. And so thank you for having me, Diana. And
well, Rebecca, thank you so much. I'm hopeful that some of these thoughts and words around getting at and understanding those things that are holding us back, because I think that's probably the biggest barrier between action and inaction, and following our dreams or following those passions that we've buried over the years. And one of the things I would just ask, and it's really hard for, I can't see everybody. I can see just a screen at a time here, but I would love, and Wendy, I don't know if you can monitor and help us, but I'd love for anybody just to raise your blue hand or your hand in the screen, if you feel like you are at a place where you get the limiting beliefs or those things that are holding you back, but you're still sort of feeling stuck. And if so, if you want to, shout it out or talk about it and share it with us. I think it really helps to hear it from others, because I think we all have very common things. The term Rebecca used that I think we've all heard from our parents when we were growing up. So much of this comes from the information, the relationships, the parenting, the siblings, the schoolmates, the teachers we had when we were very, very young shape a lot of our limiting beliefs. And the term, don't toot your horn. How many of you guys heard that term told to you by your families?
What did you say, Diana?
Don't toot your horn. I can hear my mother or father's voice in my ears so much. And that, we like to say we get it and we understand it, but it is really hard to bust through those. What are some of the other limiting beliefs that you guys learned or internalized when you were very young? Does anybody want to just throw out a term or a word or an experience?
I think that the don't toot your horn and don't brag is very connected with the burden of the fear of success.
Yeah.
I can't find the thing I mean. It's not the fear of success. It's the shining one.
Yeah. Don't outshine.
Yeah.
But don't outshine your brother. He can't do as well in school as you, or, those kinds of messages are really powerful, right?
And I know men got messages, but boy, I tell you, women got all those messages so strongly.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day who was a little bit older than me, but she had a dream when she was young to be an architect. And I said, well, why didn't you? She goes, oh, I was told that women didn't do that. I remember stories of my grandmother who was a gifted potter. Nope, you don't do that. You have to go have a family. So yeah, there's a people in their 70s and 80s and beyond, but there are also innovative free thinkers who have have figured out those limiting beliefs earlier in their lives and marched to their own path. And I happen to know a few of them, and one of them that was on this call tonight, and I don't see her anymore, but I'm just so pleased that you've all gathered together with us tonight. And I thank you, Rebecca, and I thank Pedro and Deborah and Stephen and Kerry. Ann Cutler just said there's a great book about tooting your horn. Tell us about it, Ann. What?
I just wanted to mention too, while Ann gets on, is that I didn't go into ageism, but ageism is definitely another limiting belief that, we are too old to, fill in the blank. And Diane, I know that you covered that really well in the Third at Quest programs that you have, in terms of the fact that women are living longer and we're much healthier. And so even though we may have heard that message, and society reinforces that message, that it's so not true. And we have
so many years, up to 30 years longer than our great grandmothers. So
Peggy Krause is an executive coach, and she came to speak to a women's group where I work, and she talks about, people want to say, oh, I was just like a B- student, but you have to frame it like, I took a lot of classes I was interested in, but I had, you just have to rewrite your narrative, not to focus on anything negative. You have to, there's a way of scripting the narrative in your brain so that you see, like, if something was hard, but you made it through, you can't sell yourself short. I'm not describing it very well, but it's very, she has like little case studies of like what happened, how you would describe it. It's sort of like doing a resume for yourself. You have to kind of make everything into a positive.
I love Deb's description of creating portfolio, and more like millennials, because I think that's what many of us need to do, because we didn't take a linear path. So
yeah, for whatever it's worth, I'd like to share with you, because I'm the father of 4 girls.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I think it's important, because one thing I realized is the amount of time that I had to repeat through life that you don't need not to be yourself and who you are and how you feel and how you think, just to be successful. Yeah, the success is measured of how many people, how much good you do, how many people you lead, how many, and you in your own capacity, you put your own limitations. So, and they had so much peer pressure in the outside to them that I had to just compensate constantly. Yes. Right. I couldn't, this is something I couldn't understand. I said, for me is, I find one little good thing and I just run along and I just try to conquer the world and kill everybody, right? But for that is constantly the reminding of I mean, very subtly, right? It's just a very simple conversation in an open environment of how are you going to develop this skill, or how are you going to improve the situation, how you want to move to the next thing, and they have just grown as women, and it's just amazing. I see those things, but I tell them, I realize how complicated it is. I tell them that now you are getting married, you're gonna get a family, you have to make decisions there. Mom is a great artist, decided to be with you, but you might decide something else. That doesn't make you worse. You just need to balance all these things. But it's constant. I mean, my oldest one is almost 30. I'm talking to her with the same passion and motivation as when she was 6 or 7 years old, but because it's always questioning, the self-questioning about every single thing. And it's just difficult.
It's hard to shed. It's hard to shed. I like to say though, this is our time in life. You know, it's like I said, I see the end zone. I know the end zone's been there forever, but I see it. So like, no more messing around, flip those limiting beliefs and find those gifts, realize those gifts and
Absolutely.
go for it. And, so it takes really defining moments in time. And I think this pandemic is serving this up for us all. Yeah, it's dragging us down big time. It's anxiety producing, the uncertainty of the future, and the debate starting now. So I should probably release you, but I really would just say, as we depart, I don't want to sound like a Pollyanna, but I really do believe this is our time. It's a time to reinvent our lives. It's a time to get rid of those crappy limiting beliefs, and just say, look, it is what it is. The past is over. In my mind, I can shape a more positive future for my life. And it's up to me. It's up to my mind and the way I think. That's what I control. I can't control the world. I can't control this virus. I control the way I think. And then the path I'm on in my life. So thank you all very much. I encourage you to come tomorrow night. Gina Vild, who is a dear friend from outside of Boston, is going to share a talk called Resilience for the Ages. So it's very fitting to the flow of this week. She's written a book that I love called The Two Most Important Days: the day you were born and the day you figure out why. So with that, I'll hope you join us tomorrow night. And thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for being here. And I'm seeing people sign off, but before you all do, I say put it on gallery view and wave to each other and open your mics and say goodnight. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
night. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Bye.
Take good care.
Thank you.